Hola, everybody. I'm Yvonne Armenta. Welcome to the Chats with Yvonne podcast, where I talk about public speaking con cultura. And today, we're going to talk about getting paid to speak. In particular, and specifically, we're going to talk about rates. What should you be getting paid to speak? I want to start off by saying that it depends on many, many different things. My pricing is going to be different than yours, is going to be different than everybody's because of a couple different factors, and we're going to get into some of them. My hope is that by the end of this podcast episode, you have some idea of what to charge, how to charge, and what types of levels there are to your speaker rates. Before we get into that, we have to pick a card out from the Public Speaking con Cultura practice card deck, and today we are going to pull an affirmation out. This is the Del Corazón segment, and these are affirmations that I created with all of my public speakers in mind. Fun fact, I used to have a podcast that was called the Ponte Perra Affirmations Podcast. If you're into it, if you want to, the episodes are still live. I'm not actively creating on there, but the very first episodes that I created were inspired by my journey as a public speaker. And I took a lot of those affirmations and created some new ones to put into this section of the Public Speaking con Cultura practice card deck. So I'm going to randomly pick one of these cards out and let that be the intention of how we go through the rest of today. All right, let's see. This one's beautiful. One of my favorites. This affirmation says, "My story is my superpower. Mi historia es mi superpoder." And I think that's beautiful because storytelling is so incredibly impactful. There is nothing more powerful than storytelling. It is what connects all of us, what humanizes all of us, what makes us realize that we're a lot more the same than we are different, and that our differences actually make us so beautiful and so connected to one another. Differences connect us. And my story, our story being our superpower, is exactly how I want to lead into this conversation about our rates. Because I've said this before, but you don't get paid to be a speaker. You get paid for the years of experience that you have, for those beautiful stories that you carry with you, the lived experiences that no one has ever lived before but you, your unique perspective within your lived experience. Think about how cool and valuable it is that you have the most unique perspective. And I say the most unique perspective because every single one of us has that. Every single one of us has a unique perspective that no one else has. No one else can tap into it, into the themes of your story in the ways that you can. That is a superpower. And speaking of rates, you should be, you could be, you most definitely will be getting paid for it. So let's jump right into it. In one of my past podcast episodes, I think I shared general speaking rates, and I'll summarize that really quickly. And these are averages. These are averages that I found online that I know of just from my experience, but they are by no means the end all be all. You could be a quote beginner speaker and get paid like a expert speaker, because again, you don't get paid for being a speaker. You get paid for all the years of experience that you bring with you and your expertise. That being said, I'm going to walk through all of the different rates that you could potentially charge and have, but also, hey, what's the difference between a keynote, between a panel, between a fireside chat? So we're going to get into that. Let me just stop rambling and get into it. Let's start with how you could base your rates on general fees based on experience level. So an emerging speaker, that means maybe you haven't had a talk before. You haven't done a talk on this particular topic before, which is that's the importance there. You haven't done a talk on that particular topic. Maybe it's the first time that you're presenting the signature topic. That's important to differentiate there, because again, it doesn't mean that you don't have experience in something. If you have an experienced career in communications and it's the first time that you're taking a stage, you're not starting at this rate. You're starting above that because you have experience. So an emerging speaker, anywhere from $500 to $2,500 per talk. An experienced speaker, meaning you have a reputation around being a speaker, you have some speaker assets and materials that you can share with people to showcase. You have a bit of a speaker resume. You can charge anywhere from $3,000 to $10,000 per talk. Keep in mind, I'm not pinpointing what kind of speaking engagement it is, right? Are we talking keynote? Are we talking panel? Are we talking workshop style? So that's why this is a general look at pricing. If you are a high demand or thought leader, real established thought leader, $10K to $25K and up. I've shared this before, but I got paid $15,000 for my very first keynote, and I was blown away at the idea that this could potentially be something that I did. I was blown away at the fact that I was making $1,000 per minute. It was a 15-minute presentation. I made $1,000 every minute. That is wild, but that is the value in sharing stories. That is the value in recognizing, like the affirmation says, that our story es nuestro superpoder. Es nuestro poder. Y poder contar nuestra historia is such a privilege, such an honor. It's how we connect with one another. Lots of thoughts there. So that's general based on experience level. I want to go into adjusting your rates or thinking about your rates by event type. I do think there is a bit of a hierarchy in the types of speaking engagements and how much one costs over the other because of the time that you spend preparing on it, the amount of people in the audience, the importance of that particular speech to the overall theme of a conference, for example. So let's start with keynote speeches. I'm not going to give you a rate or what you should charge for these because I think it just depends. But keynote speeches, you can charge your higher rates because it's a larger audience. It's maybe they have big ticket sponsors, right? When an event has sponsors, you're more likely to get paid even more because one, again, it's a high ticket event. Maybe people have to pay a lot of money to actually come to that conference. It's being sponsored. You are bringing the theme of the conference home. So keynote speeches, I would say, are kind of top tier, and by top tier I mean you can charge more for those kinds of speaking engagements. Workshops or trainings, these are also typically a little bit higher because you are now adding facilitation. It's not just speaking and sharing your story, which already requires some level of preparation, but now you're also facilitating the learning of a group of people. You can prepare I think there's more preparation that goes into a workshop or a training because you have to make it really specific to the people in the audience, meaning it almost feels like you individualize it a little bit more, individualize it to the organization. The way that I deliver my Public Speaking 101 workshop to high school students is different than how I'm going to present it and facilitate it for a group of experts in their field or a group of team members early in their career in tech, for example. I'm getting real specific there, but workshops or training can be higher because of the preparation and the engagement pieces that you add in throughout. Then we have a panel participation. Again, many different variables here, but this is maybe a little bit lower of a rate than your keynotes and your workshops because you may not be the only person on stage or sharing the stage with someone else. Requires less preparation oftentimes. And yes, it's not just about you. You're not the only one on stage. There are other people there, and you likely don't get as much talk time. Again, I'm just generalizing here. You charge what you want, right? Then there's emceeing or moderating an event. This one depends because you can use this event moderation or emceeing as visibility. So then you get to decide where in these tiers of types of public speaking it lands as far as your rate goes. But also, it depends how long the event is, right? I may not charge as much for an event that is 2 hours long, but I may not charge as much for an event that's 2 hours long as I would for an event that is 6 hours long and requires me to be there for a whole 6 hours, and the programming is different, right? So this one will depend. I do think that your keynote workshop, if I were to rank it, right, it's keynote, workshops, panels, emceeing, and moderation as far as your rates go. So if your rate for a keynote is $10K, then your workshops are $15K. 10 to 15K, probably a little bit more than your keynote, depending on the preparation. Again, your emceeing could potentially be anywhere from 2 to 8K, right? Again, just depending on how long you're there, what you're actually doing, your role and what you feel is valuable, a valuable exchange for your time and preparation for it. Because also emceeing in moderation, I tend to charge a little bit more for that too, because y'all, I'm an introvert, but I am a high energy person as well. So when you hire me to hype a crowd up, I will do that. I will do my job really, really well. But it also takes a lot of preparation up here mentally for me to prepare for that. And virtual engagements. I was looking this average up. I've never really based it on this, but I wanted to find the average of how someone would charge for a virtual event versus a keynote. And the number that they shared was you charge 50 to 70% of your rate, of your in-person rate, because it requires less travel and time commitment. You could charge the same thing for your keynote in person versus virtual if you wanted. Someone might negotiate with you a bit, and then you get to make that decision. Virtual engagements are actually, when I think about unpaid speaking engagements, I will prioritize having them be virtual engagements, because if I'm not getting paid to speak, I have to think about all the things that make up time spent, right? The things that I'm investing in. For example, my time traveling to somewhere, an outfit that I'm going to wear, gas or mileage or whatever it is that goes into that. I prefer to do virtual speaking engagements if they're going to be unpaid. And I reserve the unpaid speaking engagements. Obviously, I've done a lot of unpaid speaking engagements for organizations and nonprofits that I align with. So it is about creating that boundary for yourself. But as far as your rates go, you can decide, hey, okay, maybe I can charge a little bit less for a virtual keynote versus an in-person keynote because of all these other different factors. That being said, today's affirmation said, Nuestra historia es nuestro superpoder. Our story is our superpower. That means that you bring an incredibly unique, valuable something to the table. You bring an incredibly unique, valuable asset add to the organization that you're speaking at. And you should leverage that and add that into your rates. Meaning, being a first-gen Latina, an introvert, being someone that has lived a lot of different things and experiences, it has shaped and molded the way that I do the work that I do today. Someone that worked in tech for 8 years in internal communications, social impact, community management, that needs to be added to my rate. Because when you ask me to speak, I'm bringing all of those experiences and that perspective to the stage with me. So please, 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 I talked about general rates and how to think about them. Now add on that you have this unique perspective. Add a little bit of that in there, because we think, especially sometimes I think about this, but as community members, we're in the community so often and we are surrounded by first gen stories. So we start to think it's common, and it really isn't. It truly is not the experience of as many people as we think it is. Whenever we share our story, there are still people out there that have never shared their own story, that have never felt called to or have never been provided the space to do that. And so our stories are still really, really, really unique. Charge accordingly. So I want us to do a little exercise today. If you are tuning in from your carro, do not do this. Please go home when you're able to take a pause, but sit down and write down the types of public speaking engagements that you do. So I'll give you an example. I wrote down a couple of things that I think you may be able to add onto your rate card, and that is keynote speeches, workshops or trainings, panel participation, emceeing or moderating, webinars and or virtual events, and any custom content creation. So these are things like videos for an organization that asks for it. These are things like speeches specific to someone, something that's outside of your signature topics. If you have to do any additional preparation, incorporate any additional activities on top of your regular keynote, you should have a rate for that so that you know how to charge accordingly. So that is what should be on your rate card. Sit down, write those things down. And go back to where I talked about experience levels and what you could be charging there, and then add some. Think about the hierarchy of charging more for keynotes than you do maybe for virtual engagements. Then I want you to think about your target audience. The audience that you speak to is very, very important and can determine your rates. It is very important to differentiate between, or at least I think it's useful, not important, but it's useful to differentiate between our nonprofit organizations versus audience members in a corporate industry versus audience members that are maybe small business owners and they're buying tickets to a conference. That matters a lot when putting your rates together. Think about travel costs, everything that goes into you being on that stage. Generally, you can add $2,000 to $5,000 of travel costs depending on where you're traveling to, where you want to stay, all those kinds of things. But anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000, I think, is a good average to add on top of your fee for travel fees. If the company says, hey, we're taking care of all the travel fees, then you can take that off of your fee and your rate for it. But I would say if you're traveling somewhere, on top of your keynote rate, add on a travel fee so that you can make sure that you're all covered with travel expenses and have maybe potentially a little extra left over. Think about time commitment per type of public speaking. So how much time does it take you? How much time do you have to commit for the keynote? How much time do you have to commit to prepare for the workshop, for the training? How much time do you have to commit for emceeing or moderating a panel? That all matters and should be incorporated into your rate. Of course, you have to think about the value that you're providing, your expertise. You do not get paid for being a speaker. You get paid for all the years of experience in your career and your story that you have, your lived experiences. Being an amazing public speaker, yes, that is valuable too. Practice your craft. Get really good at public speaking so that you can get paid even more. But your value doesn't come from how many speaking engagements you have, though down the line, that does really help. Like I talked about, the experience level at the very beginning. But even if you are just starting out, you can and should get paid to speak. If the organization wants you, or you feel like as a part of your workshops or trainings, you want to have any additional deliverables like handouts. I like to, since launching the Public Speaking con Cultura practice card deck, a lot of what I will offer in addition to my workshop is say, hey, if you would like me to bring in some cards and give those to attendees, this is how much it's going to cost. It's a customization. So then you can add that into your rate. Something to also consider in your rates are your speaker business expenses. Things like, do I have to pay a videographer to come and record this particular speaking engagement? Does the organization already offer that? I have a website that I have to upkeep and maybe people that I need to pay to create copy for me. I need to incorporate that into my plan for my rates. And I would also think about, in a year, how much do you want to be making from speaking, and plan your rates according to that. And one thing that I don't think as speakers we often consider in our rates is any professional development that you have to do in order to show up the way that you do. Meaning, let's say, for example, you booked a consulting session with me to get ready for that speaking engagement. Account that into your rates for public speaking. That could potentially be something that you factor in. You don't have to. You don't have to think about all that if you don't want to. But it might be something to consider when you are putting your rates together. All in all, putting rates together for speaking can be really intimidating. I get it. I totally understand it. And it is important to set your boundaries with them. I think what makes it easier is just having a set base rate that I have. So I have my rate for keynotes, for workshops, for trainings, for emceeing, for all these different things that I mentioned. And at the same time, so it makes it easy to say, copy and paste, these are my rates, send them over. Folks will either get back to me and say, hey, that's above my budget, that's right in alignment, can we negotiate? And I do remain flexible because, like I said, it's important to me to show up for my community. And oftentimes nonprofits, small businesses may not have the capital to pay me what my rates are, but then I get to decide whether it's something that I can do, that I'm energetically aligned with, that values are aligned. I get to decide that. So it's not to say your rate is set in stone. Shoot, sometimes you could charge even more, just depending on the situation, right? If a company comes to you and you know they have the budget and you said, hey, my keynotes are usually 10K, why don't you try 15? See if that works out. Because the worst thing that could happen is they're like, oh no, that's above our budget. And you still land somewhere at your 10K mark anyway. Once you develop your rate, it's easy to just copy and paste and just say, these are my rates, y esto es lo que cobro, y it takes off the pressure from you as the speaker to have to figure out how much should I charge them on the spot or wait for them to give you their budget. So that's what I'll say on that. Negotiating your agreements and the payments and all of that kind of stuff is a whole different topic. And maybe I'll do a separate podcast episode for that. And I want to bring someone in actually to talk about that, because I heard someone say something at a networking event recently that said, as Latinas, there's this idea that we're not great negotiators. And she said, I actually think that's wrong. We are incredible negotiators when it's for somebody else. And I was like, oh my God, that's true. Like, I have the hardest time negotiating for myself, but let me have to negotiate on behalf of my amiga, on someone that I'm representing, on someone whose value I know, whose work ethic I understand. I can do it. I'm a little bit bolder when it comes to that. And I just think that falls in line with the power of our community and how community-centric we actually are. I can advocate for you. And how do I turn that back around and advocate for myself as well? One of those things, I think, is getting really clear about what your rates are, writing them down, and just having them there so that when the time comes, there is no thinking that you have to do around it. It's just already all there for you. So if you don't have a rate card yet, I would sit down and just write those things down. And don't base it off of what you've been paid before to speak. Base it on a couple of these factors that we talked about. Do your research in your industry, whatever speaking topic you have, whatever your expertise is. Do research on what everybody else is also getting paid for this. Or just do your market research and decide your rates based on those things. And I want to tap into why it's so important to have our rates and to get paid. It's not because, hey, we just want to be rich and just make hella money. I don't believe that that is the sole intention of this. It's so important to develop our rates and to get paid because fortunately, unfortunately, we live in a capitalistic world. There's no escaping it. And we need to be paid our worth. Having your rate and clearly communicating it to someone is you recognizing your worth. And by turn, having them also recognize your worth. If I keep downplaying my rates, if I keep downplaying what I should get paid, that means that that's an excuse for that organization or that person to go pay another Latina less for what they're offering as well. It makes it, when you charge your rate como se debe, it makes it so that someone else can also get paid that same rate or above. So that we are creating a playing field where Latinas are not underpaid, where women are not underpaid, where women of color are not underpaid. Because we now are saying, nope, we're creating this ecosystem where we get paid the big bucks because we bring the expertise. We know our worth. And when we know our worth and start communicating that worth, it makes it a lot harder for anybody else to tell us that we're not worth that. It's about sustainability and growth. If I can't get paid to speak, which is my bread and butter, then that means that this is not sustainable for me. That I will not be able to grow as a speaker and grow my business because I'm not asking for the money that I deserve. I'm not getting paid what I deserve. And deserving is, we can go back and forth about what deserving means. To me, deserving is I have a track record of I'm good at this, I does this, and I've been doing this, right? So you're deserving of it because you've worked for it. It also communicates to people that this isn't just a hobby, that this is what you do. It should be respected. And this one ties into something I said before, but the representation and equity. If we get clear about our rates and start charging that and are unapologetic about what our rate is, that means that, again, someone else can see themselves on the stage and make a really great living from being a public speaker. Or at the very least, share their story and get paid for it, just like everybody else does. Because when I first started getting paid to speak, this was a new concept for me. I didn't know that this was something that people just did. Because in our community, we tend to be so community oriented. Think about our traditional oratory history. People don't get paid for that, right? It's something that we share because we're passing down knowledge to one another. And it's beautiful. And we live in a world where there are other people getting paid so much money. So it's about representation and equity and creating an ecosystem where everybody gets paid what they deserve. It's only right, y'all. And this leads me into the last segment of this podcast episode, which, all of those things being said, getting paid is so important because it helps us to create our own. When I get paid, I'm not doing it to keep all my money and to hoard all the money to myself. I'm doing it to pour back into my community. And at least that's what I think we should be thinking about, right? And when it gets hard to ask for that money, I want to share something that someone shared with me during a coaching session. And that was that whenever it feels tough to ask for money, or when it feels like you're selling yourself out because you're asking this person that's like dangling the resources in front of you and has all the money, to think about it this way. Think to yourself, they didn't get that money because they are more deserving of it than I am. They're not in the position that they are because they're more deserving than I am. They may have had more access to resources and opportunities, and that's why they're there. And the money that they have didn't just come out of nowhere. It came from, to some capacity, the exploitation of labor. And that labor tends to be the people in our communities. So when I ask for my rate, when I ask for funding for a grant, for whatever it is, I am taking that money back from the people they took it from the work, from the labor that they extracted that money from. I'm bringing it back into the community. And that, I think, is so powerful to think about, because then it leads us into having the capacity and the capital to create our own. It's February and it's Black History Month, and I want to end today's podcast episode on a segment where I highlight someone in the community, like I always do, someone or people or something in the community, something in our cultura that resonates deeply with the topic of the podcast. And today I want to talk about Keke Palmer. I love Keke Palmer. Like, fun fact, I love her. I need to go get her book. She is amazing, incredible, so freaking talented, and very, very, very smart and intelligent. I love her for many, many, many reasons. But I don't know if y'all saw that they call her Keke Keep a Job Palmer, because she is literally in everything. I went on Google to ask it, hey, tell me all the jobs that Keke Palmer has, because what she's been able to do with her career is take those moments, all those jobs, and create multiple businesses and her own TV network, which I'm going to talk about in just a little bit. But so Keke Palmer is I think, an amazing example of when you ask and receive what you deserve, you create empires. So, and all for better. You create empires rooted in authenticity, rooted in community. And that's the difference. So anyway, she is an actress known for roles in Aquila and the Bee, True Jackson VP, Hustlers, Nope, and more. She's a singer and musician, beautiful voice, by the way. Released several albums, EPs, and singles. Television host, co-hosted Strahan, Sarah, and Keke, and hosted the MTV VMAs. She's a producer, executive producer of projects like Alice and Turned Up with the Taylors, which I loved. I think that was on Facebook or something. I think I remember it being on Facebook. She's an author. She wrote I Don't Belong to You, Quiet the Noise, and Find Your Voice. I think that's the book I'm trying to go get. I'm probably going to go to Barnes & Nobles and get it soon. She's a comedian and internet personality. She has so many viral moments, and it literally is just her being herself. I love her. She's an entrepreneur. She launched Key TV, a digital platform highlighting Black creators. up and coming producers and creators, which it's so amazing. If y'all have not followed along or know about Key TV, please go check it out. It's Keke TV. She's a voice actress. She voiced characters in Lightyear, The Proud Family, Louder and Prouder, and more. A philanthropist and advocate, she advocates for mental health, diversity in media, and social justice. And here's one thing that I love about Keke: diversification. She is in every little thing, and she's good at it, and she shows up authentically, and she gets paid. She gets paid for every single thing that she does, and she turns it and makes it even bigger. She takes that and duplicates the success from it. To directly quote this article, I'm going to read off here so I don't butcher it, but she's done it all while staying true to her brand of authenticity and humor. There's no Hollywood star gimmicks or antics, just strategic boss moves wrapped in viral moments and genuine connections with her audience. Remember when Palmer had us crying with her "sorry to this man" moment? That viral clip could have been just another funny internet moment. But Keke said, "Hold my business plan." She transformed that social media momentum into Key TV, putting $500,000 of her own money into launching the Los Angeles-based digital network. This wasn't just another celebrity vanity project. It was a calculated investment in the future of entertainment. The network hit the ground running with 9 original series, all developed, shot, and produced by what Palmer calls a new generation of creators. This isn't just about building her own platform. It's about creating a pipeline for fresh talent to enter the industry. We're asking for our money back, to put it back into our communities. Asking for your rate is essential to our collective growth as a community. So next time that you feel bad about, "Ay, no sé cuánto cobrar aquí, no sé si cobrar esto, ay, is this too much?" Think about the power of your dollars being used to create something like Keke has right here. Key TV, her own TV network, giving opportunities to new creators in get all those jobs, get paid what she deserves, and then use her own money to create this network. When you ask for your rate, I know that you are doing it because you know it's your worth, you know it's what you deserve, you want to live a joyful, a restful life. But I also know that you're giving back to community, and you're building with the foundation of community at your core. And that's why asking for your money is essential as a speaker. It's not just about you. I mean, the very act of you being a speaker isn't for you. It's to impact the people that are tuning in, the people that listen to your message. It's to help transform to some capacity their lives, their minds. Money is a way to do that as well. It's a way to make your impact even bigger. With that being said, I hope that you found this podcast episode helpful. I hope that you can go home right now, or if you are home, get a piece of paper out and start thinking about what your rates are. Start communicating them. Get paid to speak. It's one of the best ways to ensure that we're creating a strong foundation for our communities to continue to grow and thrive, and for you to continue to grow and thrive within your community. Thank you all so much for tuning in to the Chats with Yvonne podcast episode, Public Speaking con Cultura. I am so excited to see you take the stage. I am beyond thrilled that this is the kind of space that we're creating where you can get paid to speak. And as a result, we're all that much better for it. Continue to share your story. Your story is your superpower. Continue to share your expertise and continue to charge accordingly. Share this podcast episode with your tías, your primas, your moms, your amigas, your tías, everybody and their mamas. Y nos vemos a la próxima.